The salt air stung his eyes as he crouched behind a stack of crates, his calloused hands trembling. Not from fear, but from the weight of what he'd just done. Through the thin walls of the supply shed, he could hear boots pounding against wooden planks, officers barking orders in Japanese. They hadn't found the body yet, but they would. Any minute now. He pressed his back against the rough wood, forcing his breathing to slow. In his mind, he rehearsed every movement from the past hour, searching for mistakes. Had he left a footprint? A smudge? Had anyone seen him near the officers' quarters? The disguise that had gotten him this far, the weathered fishing vest, the salt-stained trousers, the calloused hands of a man who'd spent his life pulling nets from the sea, now felt paper-thin. Before we dive in, I want to know, where are you listening to this story from? Drop your city or country in the comments right now, and let's see which corner of the world has the most War Legend fans. Don't just scroll, type it out. Your comment might get featured in the next story. A shout pierced the morning air. Then another. They'd found him. The compound erupted into chaos. He could hear them now, dozens of voices overlapping, commands being shouted, confusion spreading like wildfire through the garrison. Through a crack in the shed wall, he watched soldiers pouring from the barracks, officers emerging from their quarters, everyone converging on the small building where Major Tanaka had slept his last sleep. His heart hammered against his ribs. This was the moment everything could unravel. One Filipino fisherman among hundreds of workers in the compound. One man who shouldn't be here, who had no business being anywhere near a Japanese officer's quarters at 4 o'clock in the morning. But you want to know how he got here, don't you? How a simple fisherman ended up crouching in an enemy garrison, the blood of a Japanese major not yet dry, waiting for the interrogations that would surely come. It started 3 weeks earlier, in a different kind of darkness. The guerrilla camp sat deep in the mountains of Bataan, hidden beneath a canopy so thick that daylight barely penetrated. Captain Romero stood before a crude map pinned to a bamboo wall, his finger tracing the coastline south of Manila Bay. The Japanese have fortified every major position along the coast, he said, his voice low but urgent. But there's one officer who's been particularly effective at rooting out our supply lines. Major Kenji Tanaka. Sitting on a log bench, Felipe Mercado listened intently. At 32 years old, he'd spent most of his life on the water, a real fisherman before the war, which made him perfect for what Romero had in mind. Tanaka's based at the garrison in Nasagupu, Romero continued. Small compound, maybe 200 men. They've been using local fishermen to supply fresh catch for the officers. We've managed to get one of our men, Carlos, positioned there for the past 2 months. He's established himself as reliable, someone they trust. Felipe knew where this was going. You want me to replace him? Not replace. Join him. Romero pulled a photograph from his pocket. A Japanese officer in his mid-40s, stern face, thin mustache. Tanaka's intelligence has cost us 17 men in the past month. He's methodical, ruthless, and he's got information about our supply routes that could cripple us if he shares it with Manila Command. He's scheduled to meet with senior staff in 2 weeks. So we have 2 weeks to stop him. We have 2 weeks to make him disappear. Romero's eyes were hard, not in combat, not in a way that creates a martyr or speeds up his intelligence transfer. He needs to die quietly, mysteriously, in a way that creates confusion rather than retaliation. Felipe understood. A public assassination would bring reprisals against local villages. A missing officer would bring investigation, but not immediate vengeance. How do I get close? Carlos will introduce you as his cousin, new to the area, learning the trade. You'll deliver fish, observe patterns, build familiarity. The Japanese have gotten comfortable with the fishermen. You're beneath their notice, part of the background. That's your advantage. Over the next week, Felipe transformed himself. He already had the weathered skin and calloused hands of someone who'd spent years on the water, but Carlos taught him the specific routines of the Nasubu compound, the delivery schedule, every morning at 6 o'clock, the locations, fish dropped at the kitchen, officer's mess, sometimes directly to the senior staff quarters, the people, which guards were strict, which were lazy, which spoke broken Tagalog and liked to chat. The key, Carlos explained as they repaired nets together, is consistency, Same route, same time, same demeanor. They've seen me so many times I'm invisible. You need to become invisible too. Felipe absorbed everything. The layout of the compound, sketched in the dirt and memorized. The schedule of the guards, their rotation patterns. The location of Major Tanaka's quarters, a small building near the eastern wall, separate from the other officers, close to the command post. Tanaka's paranoid, Carlos said. Keeps to himself. Eats in his quarters most mornings, reviews intelligence reports. He has a personal orderly, Private Sato, who brings breakfast at 6:30. That's your window. After the fish delivery, before Sato arrives. How do I get from the kitchen to his quarters without being seen? You don't. Carlos smiled grimly. You're seen, but you're not noticed. There's a difference. You're a fisherman checking the nets you stored by the supply shed. You're lost. You're looking for the latrine. You're a face they've seen enough times the questions die before they're asked. The plan crystallized over days of careful observation. Felipe would make 3 preliminary deliveries with Carlos, establishing his presence. On the 4th delivery, a Saturday morning when the overnight guard shift was lightest and soldiers slept in later, he would complete the delivery, then circle back through the compound to Tanaka's quarters. The method had to be silent, certain, and leave no obvious evidence of violence. A blade would leave blood. Strangulation required time and risk of struggle. Felipe had learned something else during the war, though something the Japanese had taught the Philippines through years of brutal occupation. He'd learned chemistry. In a small village pharmacy raided months earlier, guerrillas had recovered Japanese medical supplies. Among them, sodium fluoroacetate, used in rat poison. Colorless, odorless, nearly tasteless. In sufficient concentration, it caused cardiac arrest within hours, symptoms resembling a heart attack. Mixed into the right medium, tea, rice wine, even just water, it was undetectable until too late. You'll have maybe 3 minutes in his quarters, Carlos warned. Tanaka drinks green tea every morning, keeps a pot ready on his desk from the night before. He reheats it himself. Doesn't trust orderlies with his morning routine. If you can dose the tea, he'll drink it within an hour of your leaving. And I'll be long gone by the time he collapses. If everything goes perfectly. Carlos fixed him with a hard stare. But nothing ever goes perfectly. You need to be ready for interrogation, because it will come. When Tanaka dies, they'll question everyone who was in that compound. Your story needs to be airtight. Felipe spent his final days before insertion rehearsing every detail of his cover. He was Felipe Mercado, fisherman from Balayan, helping his cousin Carlos expand the business to Nasugbu. He'd been fishing since he was 12 years old. His father died in 1938. His mother lived with his sister in Manila. No, wait. That was too risky, too easy to check. His mother lived in Balayan, too old to travel. He had no wife, no children. He knew nothing about politics, nothing about guerrillas. He just wanted to fish and stay alive. Simple, believable, boring. On Friday afternoon, the 13th of October, 1944, Felipe walked into the Nasugbu garrison for the first time alongside Carlos, carrying a basket of fresh lapu-lapu on his shoulder. The compound was smaller than he'd imagined from Carlos's descriptions. A rectangular perimeter of wooden walls topped with barbed wire, guard towers at each corner, a single main gate facing west toward the town. Inside, buildings clustered in rough organization. Barracks along the northern wall, officers' quarters to the east, command post and armory in the center, kitchen and supply sheds to the south. Guards at the gate barely glanced at them. Carlos exchanged familiar nods, a few words in broken Japanese about the morning's catch. Felipe kept his head down, following his cousin's lead, just another fisherman beneath notice. They delivered to the kitchen first, a sweltering shack where 2 Filipino cooks worked under the supervision of a Japanese corporal. The corporal inspected the fish with professional efficiency, grunted approval, waved them toward the officer's mess. "Same as always, Carlos," he said in accented Tagalog. "Good quality. Your cousin, he learns from you." "He's learning, Corporal Yamada," Carlos replied. "Still clumsy with the nets, but his hands are strong." Yamada looked at Felipe properly for the first time. Felipe met his eyes briefly. Not challenging, not cowering, just the neutral acknowledgement of someone used to being inspected and dismissed. After a moment, Yamada nodded and turned away. They made 2 more deliveries that morning, one to the officers' mess, another to a storage shed where fish were salted and preserved. Each stop, Felipe memorized layouts, observed routines, made himself visible enough to be remembered as Carlos's cousin, but unremarkable enough to be forgotten as an individual. As they left through the main gate, Carlos murmured, "You see the small building east of the command post? Blue door, Tanaka's quarters. Tomorrow morning, 6:20. The guards change shift at 6:15. There's a 3-minute gap when the new shift is still settling in, checking the perimeter. That's when you move." The second delivery on Saturday morning went identically. Same routine, same guards, same exchanges. Felipe felt himself settling into the rhythm of invisibility. The way Carlos moved through the compound like water, noticed but unremarkable, present but already forgotten. By the third delivery, on Wednesday morning, Private Sato recognized them both. "Carlos? Fresh mackerel today?" "Always fresh for the Major," Carlos replied with a smile. Felipe understood the game now. These small exchanges built familiarity, created the background noise of normal routine that would make his final visit seem equally unremarkable. That night, back in the guerrilla camp, Captain Romero handed Felipe a small glass vial wrapped in cloth. "Enough for 3 doses. More than that and you risk leaving residue they might detect. Mix it directly into liquid. Tea is best. It dissolves completely within seconds." Felipe held the vial up to candlelight. Clear as water. Death in a bottle. Once you dose the tea, leave immediately. Don't wait to see results. Don't deviate from your normal routine. Deliver the fish, check the nets by the supply shed like you did last time, then exit through the main gate with Carlos. By the time Tanaka drinks the tea and collapses, you'll be in a boat heading north. And when they question me, you were never near his quarters. You delivered fish to the kitchen, helped Carlos with the nets, left through the main gate. 3 guards saw you leave. Your story is solid. Felipe nodded slowly, but his mind was already working through the gaps. What if someone saw me between the supply shed and Tanaka's quarters? Who? The guards in the towers watch the perimeter, not the interior. The soldiers are in formation or at breakfast. The officers are in their quarters. You'll have 3 minutes of near invisibility. That's all you need. It sounded perfect. It sounded too perfect, but Felipe had learned long ago that perfect plans died the moment they met reality. What mattered wasn't the plan working flawlessly. It was being able to adapt when it didn't. 4 o'clock in the morning. Felipe woke in the small hut Carlos rented on the edge of Nasibu town, his mind already cycling through every step of what was to come. Beside him, Carlos slept soundly, or pretended to. They'd said everything that needed saying the night before. By 4:30 they were on the water. The boat rocked gently as they paddled south along the coast, checking nets they'd set the previous evening. The catch was decent, enough lapu-lapu and mackerel to make the delivery legitimate. Felipe worked mechanically, his hands sorting fish while his mind rehearsed the route through the compound. Kitchen delivery. Exchange with Corporal Yamada. Move to officer's mess, then to the supply shed to check the stored nets. From there, the crucial movement, east, along the southern wall, using the morning shadows, past the latrines, to the blue door of Tanaka's quarters. The vial sat in a small pocket sewn into the inside of his vest, wrapped in waterproof cloth. He'd checked it 3 times already this morning. Still there. Still intact. They reached the garrison at 5:45, earlier than usual, but not suspiciously so. Fishermen's schedules varied with the tides and the catch. The guards at the gate were finishing their shift, tired and inattentive. One of them, a Corporal Felipe had seen before, waved them through without inspection. Inside the compound, the kitchen was just coming to life. Corporal Yamada hadn't arrived yet. One of the Filipino cooks, an older woman named Rosa, greeted them with a nod. "Early today." "Good catch," Carlos replied, setting his basket down. "Best lapu-lapu this week." Felipe added his basket beside Carlos's. Then step back. I'll check those nets we stored, he said in Tagalog, loud enough for Rosa to hear. Make sure the rats haven't gotten to them. It was a detail they'd planted a week earlier, mentioning stored nets that needed regular inspection, creating a reason for Felipe to be seen moving through the compound. Rosa nodded absently, already focused on sorting the fish. Felipe walked out of the kitchen, his heart rate picking up. This was it. He moved south toward the supply shed, his pace unhurried. A soldier passed him going the opposite direction, heading toward the latrines. They didn't make eye contact? Felipe was just another fisherman, too early in the morning to be worth noticing. At the supply shed, he made a show of checking the nets hung on hooks outside, pulling one down, inspecting it for tears. His back was to the compound. To anyone watching, he was exactly what he appeared to be, 6'12". The guard shift change would happen in 3 minutes. He'd watched it for 3 weeks. The morning guards gathered at the command post at 6:15 for briefing, leaving the perimeter momentarily undermanned while the night shift headed to their barracks. He counted to 60. Then again, at 6:14, he heard the commotion of guards assembling. He hung the net back on its hook, then turned east, moving along the southern wall. Tanaka's quarters were 40 yards ahead. The blue door faced south, toward the wall. No windows on this side. Felipe kept his pace steady, neither rushing nor dawdling, just a man walking with purpose. 20 yards. 10 yards. A voice behind him in Japanese. Hey! Felipe's blood turned to ice. He turned slowly. A young soldier, couldn't have been more than 20, was walking toward him from the direction of the barracks, not running, not alarmed, just curious. The soldier repeated something in Japanese. Felipe caught only fragments. Too fast, too colloquial. He defaulted to his cover, answering in Tagalog with confusion in his voice. Sorry, sir, I don't understand. I'm just checking the nets. The soldier's face showed frustration, then he switched to broken Tagalog. You... Fisherman? Why here? Felipe gestured vaguely toward the supply shed. I got turned around, looking for the storage area. My cousin Carlos, he asked me to... The soldier waved him off, already losing interest. Too early in the morning for this. That way, he said, pointing back west. Not here. Yes, sir. Sorry, sir. Felipe bobbed his head apologetically and started to turn back. The soldier was already walking away, heading toward the latrines. Felipe waited until the man was 15 yards distant, then quickly turned back east. The brief interruption had cost him precious seconds. It was now 6:16. The guard shift had changed. His window was closing. He reached the blue door. His hand went to the handle, unlocked, as Carlos had said it would be. Tanaka's paranoia didn't extend to locking his door within the garrison. Who would dare enter a major's quarters uninvited? Felipe pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was small, Spartan. A desk against the far wall, covered in papers and maps. A narrow bed, perfectly made. A small table with a teapot and cup. The smell of green tea hung faintly in the air. The teapot sat exactly where Carlos had described it, on the table beside the window, still warm from the previous night. Tanaka's morning routine: reheat the tea, review intelligence reports, prepare for the day. Felipe moved to the table. His hands were steady now, his mind completely focused. He pulled the vial from his vest pocket, uncapped it, and poured the contents into the teapot. The liquid was absorbed instantly, invisible in the dark tea. He recapped the empty vial, returned it to his pocket. 3 minutes since entering the compound. 30 seconds in Tanaka's quarters. He turned toward the door and froze. Through the small window beside the door, he saw Private Sato approaching across the compound, carrying a covered tray. Tanaka's breakfast, arriving 15 minutes early. There was no time to exit through the door without Sato seeing him. No time to hide. The room had no closets, no cover. Felipe's mind raced. If Sato found him here, everything ended. Not just the mission. His life, Carlos's life, potentially the entire guerrilla cell. His eyes fell on the papers scattered across Tanaka's desk. A desperate idea formed. He grabbed several pages, intelligence reports, routine correspondence, and rolled them into a crude tube. Then he moved to the door, opened it just as Sato reached for the handle. They came face to face. Sato's eyes widened in shock. Felipe let his own face show surprise and confusion. He held up the rolled papers, speaking quickly in Tagalog. "Corporal Yamada sent me. He said Major Tanaka needed these documents from the kitchen immediately." Sato's Japanese came rapid-fire, angry. Felipe caught the tone more than the words. He responded with confusion, holding up the papers like a talisman. "Corporal Yamada, from the kitchen," he said. "These were urgent." Sato snatched the papers from his hand, his face furious. More Japanese, louder now. Felipe understood the universal language of anger well enough. He backed away, hands raised apologetically, bowing repeatedly. Sorry, I was just told to deliver." Sato pointed violently toward the main gate, shouting. Felipe didn't need translation. He turned and walked away quickly, not quite running, his heart hammering. Behind him, he heard Sato enter Tanaka's quarters, still cursing. The door slammed shut. Felipe forced himself to maintain his pace, not running, not panicking. Just a fisherman who'd made a mistake, confused by orders he didn't understand, leaving before he got in more trouble. He made it to the supply shed, then to the kitchen. Carlos was still there, helping Rosa organize the morning's delivery. He looked up as Felipe entered, read something in his face, but said nothing. "Ready?" Felipe asked, his voice almost steady. "Ready." They gathered their empty baskets and headed for the main gate. The guards waved them through without question. The same two fishermen who'd entered 40 minutes earlier, leaving after their delivery. Routine. Invisible. They didn't speak until they were in the boat, 100 yards from shore. "What happened?" Carlos asked quietly. "Sato arrived early. I improvised. He saw you?" "He saw you, a confused fisherman who'd been sent to deliver papers and got lost. He was angry, but not suspicious. Not yet." Carlos nodded slowly, but his expression was grim. "When Tanaka dies, Sato will remember you were in those quarters." "I know." They paddled in silence for a while, the weight of what Felipe had just done settling over them like fog. "Will the poison work?" Carlos finally asked. "If Tanaka drinks that tea within the next few hours, he'll be dead by noon. And if he doesn't drink it?" Felipe didn't answer. They both knew the alternative. If Tanaka discovered the tea was contaminated, if he suspected something wrong, he'd investigate. An investigation led to questions. Questions led to Sato's testimony about the fisherman who'd been in Tanaka's quarters. Testimony led to Felipe. All they could do now was wait. Major Kenji Tanaka collapsed at his desk at 11:27 in the morning. Private Sato, arriving with lunch, found him slumped over his intelligence reports, eyes wide and unseeing, one hand clutched over his heart. The garrison's medic, Corporal Honda, pronounced him dead within minutes. Initial assessment, cardiac arrest. Tanaka was 46 years old, relatively healthy. The sudden death was shocking but not unheard of. The stress of command, irregular sleep, constant vigilance. War killed in many ways. But Captain Ishida, Tanaka's second-in-command, was not satisfied with simple answers. "Tanaka had no history of heart problems," Ishida said, standing over the body in the medical office. "He passed his physical examination 3 months ago with no issues." Corporal Honda shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, cardiac events can happen without warning." "They can," Ishida interrupted. But Tanaka was methodical about his health. He ate carefully, exercised daily, avoided excess. For him to simply collapse at his desk? Ishida shook his head. "I want an investigation. I want to know everyone who was in this compound this morning. I want to know everyone who had access to Tanaka's quarters, his food, his water." Within an hour, the garrison was on lockdown. No one in, no one out. Every soldier, every officer, every Filipino worker who'd been present that morning was to be accounted for and questioned. Ishida set up his interrogation post in the command center, a long table with 2 chairs. Lieutenant Nakamura, the garrison's intelligence officer, sat beside him with a notebook, recording every response. They started with the obvious suspects. Private Sato was first. The young soldier stood at rigid attention, his face pale with shock and guilt. The guilt of someone who'd failed to protect his superior. Not the guilt of murder, but Ishida pressed anyway. You brought breakfast to Major Tanaka this morning? Yes, sir, at 0645. Later than usual. Yes, sir, the kitchen was delayed. They said the fisherman came early. It disrupted the routine. Did you see anyone near the Major's quarters before you arrived? Sato hesitated. Ishida leaned forward. Private? There was a fisherman, sir. One of the workers who delivers to the kitchen. He was leaving the Major's quarters as I arrived. The room went very quiet. Leaving the Major's quarters, Ishida repeated slowly. Why was a fisherman at the Major's quarters? He said Corporal Yamada sent him with papers, documents for the Major. But I don't know if that's true. I was angry. I sent him away immediately. You saw him with papers? Yes, sir. He was holding them when I arrived. I took them from him. Where are these papers now? Sato's face went even paler. I left them on the Major's desk, sir. I was angry about the intrusion. I didn't think to get them. Now. Sato practically ran from the room. He returned minutes later with a collection of documents, routine intelligence reports, correspondence, nothing marked urgent or requiring immediate delivery. Ishida examined them in silence. These are standard reports, nothing that would require immediate delivery by a fisherman. He looked up at Sato. Describe this man. Filipino, maybe 30, 35 years old. Weathered skin like someone who works on the water. He wore a fishing vest, dark trousers. He seemed confused, like he didn't understand Japanese. He kept apologizing, saying, Corporal Yamada sent him. But you don't believe Corporal Yamada actually sent him? I don't know, sir. I was focused on getting him away from the Major's quarters. I didn't question it at the time. Ishida dismissed Sato and called for Corporal Yamada. The kitchen corporal arrived looking nervous. He was a career soldier, 43 years old, competent but not ambitious. Ishida's direct stare made him sweat. Did you send a fisherman to Major Tanaka's quarters this morning with papers? No, sir. Absolutely not. You're certain? Sir, the fishermen deliver to the kitchen. They don't handle paperwork. They don't go to officers' quarters. I would never send one of them to the Major's rooms. Private Sato says the fisherman claimed you sent him. Yamada's face showed genuine confusion. That's impossible, sir. I was in the kitchen all morning. 2 fishermen came early, around 0545. Carlos and his cousin. They delivered the catch, then left. I didn't see either of them again. Carlos and his cousin, Ishida repeated. Names. Carlos. Reyes, I think. The cousin is new, started a few weeks ago. I don't know his first name. Just Carlos's cousin. Lieutenant Nakamura was already writing. Ishida leaned back in his chair, his mind working through possibilities. A fisherman with access to Tanaka's quarters. A fisherman who claimed to be delivering papers that no one had actually sent him to deliver. A fisherman whose presence in the compound coincided with Tanaka's sudden death. Bring me every person who works in that kitchen, Ishida ordered, and send soldiers into town. Find these fishermen. I want them back here within the hour. They brought in the kitchen workers one by one. Rosa, the older cook, confirmed Corporal Yamada's account, 2 fishermen, early delivery, nothing unusual. The younger cook, a boy named Miguel, remembered the same details. Both insisted they hadn't sent anyone to the Major's quarters. The cousin, Ishida asked Rosa, what was his behavior like? Quiet. Polite. He didn't speak much Japanese, just followed Carlos's lead. Did he go anywhere besides the kitchen? Rosa thought about it. He said something about checking nets at the supply shed, but that's normal. They store equipment there. Did you see him go to the supply shed? No, sir. I was busy with the fish. Ishida's frustration was building. The timeline was coming together, but slowly. Fishermen arrive early, around 5:45. They deliver to the kitchen. The cousin goes to check nets at the supply shed, a location that would put him along the southern wall, very close to Tanaka's quarters. Somehow he ends up inside those quarters with papers that no one sent him to deliver. Private Sato confronts him around 6:40. The fisherman leaves shortly after. Tanaka drinks his morning tea sometime between 7 and 11 and dies. The tea, Ishida said suddenly, turning to Corporal Honda. Did you examine what Tanaka drank this morning? Sir, there was a teapot on his desk. Green tea, but it's a common beverage. Test it, I don't care how. Find out if there's anything wrong with that tea. Honda hesitated. Sir, we don't have laboratory facilities here. To properly test for poisons would require equipment we don't. Then use your eyes, your nose, your common sense. Is there anything unusual about it? Honda left and returned with the teapot. He sniffed it, poured a small amount into a cup, examined it closely. It appears normal, sir. Standard green tea. No unusual color or odor. But without proper testing, I cannot rule out contamination. Ishida turned to Lieutenant Nakamura. Where are the fishermen? Have the soldiers found them yet? Not yet, sir. They're searching the harbor and the town. But there are many boats, many places to hide. I didn't ask for excuses. Find them. It was nearly 3 o'clock in the afternoon when soldiers finally located the small hut where Carlos rented a room. They found the landlord, an old man who confirmed 2 fishermen lived there, Carlos and his cousin. But both were gone. Their boat was gone. No one had seen them since morning. Ishida received this news with cold fury. Expand the search, north and south along the coast. Search every boat, every fishing village. I want those men found. But even as he gave the orders, he knew it was likely too late. The fishermen had hours of head start. If they were guerrillas, and Ishida was now certain they were, they'd have escape routes planned, safe houses arranged, allies ready to hide them. Still, there was one more person to question, someone who might provide a crucial detail, even unknowingly. They found the young soldier who'd confronted Felipe near the supply shed. Private Tanaka, no relation to the major, just an unfortunate coincidence of common names. He was terrified when Ishida summoned him, certain he was being blamed for something. You saw one of the fishermen this morning? Ishida asked. Yes, sir. Near the major's quarters. He seemed lost. What time? Around 06:15, sir, just after the guard change. Describe exactly what happened. Private Tanaka recounted the brief encounter. The fisherman claiming he was looking for the storage area. Seemed confused, didn't speak Japanese well. I sent him back toward the supply shed, sir. He seemed harmless, just a worker who'd gotten turned around. Did he have anything with him? Papers, packages? No, sir. Just his clothes, the fishing vest and trousers. And after you sent him away, did you see which direction he went? I went to the latrines, sir. I assumed he went back to the storage area like I told him. But he could have circled back, Ishida thought. Once Private Tanaka was in the latrines, the fisherman could have turned east again, reached the major's quarters while the guard shift was still settling in. The timeline aligned perfectly. Too perfectly. Ishida spread out the reports on his desk, arranging them in chronological order. Verify 4547 hours. Fishermen arrive early at compound 0600 hours. Delivery to kitchen completed. 06 is DO2, 0615 hours. Cousin seen near supply shed. Then confronted near major's quarters, 0615 hours. Guard shift change, brief window of reduced observation, 660. Guard shift change, brief window of reduced observation, 640 hours. Private Sato finds fisherman leaving major's quarters with papers, 645 hours. Fisherman exit compound through main gate 115 hours. Madax, if he'd poisoned the tea, he'd had means. But motive? Lieutenant, Ishida said quietly, pull all of Major Tanaka's recent intelligence reports. Specifically, anything regarding guerrilla activities in Bataan and the surrounding regions. Nakamura returned an hour later with a stack of files. Ishida read through them methodically, looking for patterns. There, a report from 3 weeks ago about disrupted guerrilla supply lines in the Balian area. 17 guerrillas killed or captured. Intelligence suggesting the guerrillas were planning retaliation. And there, a report from 5 weeks ago about increased guerrilla recruitment of civilians with specific skills. Fishermen, mechanics, medical workers. People who could move through Japanese-controlled areas without immediate suspicion. The picture crystallized. The guerrillas had identified Tanaka as a priority target. They'd infiltrated one of their people. Possibly this Carlos, possibly the cousin, possibly both, into the garrison's routine workforce. They'd waited, observed, planned, and this morning they'd executed. "Sir?" Nakamura asked. "Your orders?" Ishida stared at the reports for a long moment. Increase security at all coastal garrisons. Implement new protocols for civilian workers, background checks, daily inspections, restricted access, and send word to Manila Command. Inform them that Major Tanaka's death was not natural causes, it was assassination. Professional, calculated assassination. Should we continue the search for the fishermen? Yes, but don't expect to find them alive. If they're guerrillas, they're either well hidden or they've already been executed by their own commanders to prevent interrogation. Ishida gathered the reports into a folder. Either way, this investigation is closed. We know what happened. We just can't prove it. While Captain Ishida was piecing together his investigation, Felipe and Carlos were already 15 miles north of Nasugbu, rowing hard against the current. They'd left the hut at 7 o'clock in the morning before word of Tanaka's death had even spread. Carlos had sensed the danger immediately after Felipe described the encounter with Sato. "We can't wait to see if the poison works," Carlos had said. "Sato saw you. That's enough. We leave now." They'd taken only what they could carry. Some clothes, dried fish, water. The boat was small, built for coastal fishing, not long voyages. But it would have to do. Felipe rowed in silence, his mind replaying every moment in Tanaka's quarters. The vial. The tea. The papers he'd grabbed in desperation. Sato's face, shocked and angry. Had he made a mistake? Left some trace? Said something that would unravel his cover? "Stop thinking about it," Carlos said, reading his expression. "What's done is done. Now we focus on staying alive." They kept to the coastline, hugging the shore where they could blend in with other fishing boats. The plan was to reach San Fernando by nightfall, then make contact with guerrilla operatives who could move them inland, away from the coast where Japanese patrols would be searching. But at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they spotted patrol boats heading south from Manila Bay. 2 Japanese naval vessels, moving fast. "They're searching," Carlos said grimly. "Tanaka must be dead. They're mobilizing." Felipe's chest tightened. "Can we outrun them?" "Not in this boat." Carlos scanned the coastline. "There, that inlet. We beach the boat, hide inland until dark." They turned toward shore, rowing desperately now. Behind them, the patrol boats were still distant but closing. Felipe's arms burned with effort, his breath coming in gasps. They hit the beach and pulled the boat up onto sand, then grabbed their supplies and ran for the tree line. Behind them, they could hear the patrol boat's engines growing louder. The jungle swallowed them quickly. They moved inland, away from the sound of the ocean, until the engine noise faded. Then they stopped, breathing hard, listening. No sounds of pursuit, not yet. They'd hidden the boat poorly. In their rush, there hadn't been time to conceal it properly. If the patrol boat spotted it, they'd know someone had landed here recently. "We can't stay close to the coast," Felipe said. "We need to head inland, find the guerrilla camps in the mountains." Carlos nodded. "There's a village about 10 miles east. If we can reach it by nightfall, I know people there who can help." They walked through the afternoon, keeping to dense vegetation, avoiding roads and clearings. Felipe's fisherman's disguise was now a liability. The vest, the salt-stained clothes, too distinctive, too memorable. At a stream, he stripped off the vest and buried it under rocks. Not much of a precaution, but it was something. By evening, they reached the village, barely more than a cluster of houses surrounded by rice paddies. Carlos approached cautiously, identified a specific home, knocked in a pattern Felipe recognized as a guerrilla signal. An old woman opened the door, recognized Carlos, ushered them inside quickly. "Japanese patrols came through 2 hours ago," she said in rapid Tagalog. "Searching for 2 fishermen." They showed sketches. Felipe's blood ran cold. "Sketches?" Felipe's blood ran cold. "Sketches? Already?" "Rough ones. Based on descriptions, but close enough." The woman looked at Felipe directly. "They're saying you killed a major. They're offering a reward." Carlos swore softly. We need to move again. Tonight. There's a truck going to the mountains at midnight, the woman said. Supplies for the guerrillas. You can hide in the cargo. But after that, you're on your own. The Japanese are going to be everywhere looking for you. The next hours were tense. Felipe and Carlos waited in the woman's cellar, silent, listening to every sound outside. Twice they heard soldiers passing on the road. Once, someone knocked on the door above. Felipe's hand went to the knife at his belt, ready to fight if necessary. But it was just a neighbor, borrowing rice. At midnight, the truck arrived. They climbed into the cargo bed, buried themselves under sacks of rice and vegetables. The driver, a young Filipino man who didn't speak, didn't ask questions, started the engine and pulled onto the dark road. The journey into the mountains took hours. Every checkpoint, every Japanese patrol was a potential death sentence. But the driver knew the routes, knew which roads to avoid, which guards could be bribed with cigarettes and kind words. Dawn was breaking when they finally reached the guerrilla camp, where Felipe had started his mission a month earlier. They climbed out of the truck, stiff and exhausted. Captain Romero was waiting for them. His face showed relief, then concern as he took in their haggard appearance. "Report," he said simply. "Mission accomplished," Felipe replied. "Major Tanaka is dead, but there were complications. I was seen." Romero listened as Felipe recounted everything: the early arrival of Sato, the improvisation with the papers, the encounter with Private Tanaka, the investigation that must have followed. When Felipe finished, Romero was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "You did well. Tanaka's death will disrupt Japanese intelligence operations in this region for months, and you escaped with your life, which is more than we usually expect from these missions." "What about Carlos?" Felipe asked. "His cover is burned. He can't go back to Nasubu." "Carlos is one of us now," Romero said. "He'll join the guerrilla forces full-time. As for you..." He studied Felipe carefully. "You've proven you can operate under pressure. We'll have other missions for you when you're ready." Felipe thought about Tanaka's quarters, the teapot, the moment he poured death into an unsuspecting man's morning routine. He thought about Sato's shocked face, about Private Tanaka's casual dismissal, about all the small moments of invisibility that had made the mission possible. "I'm ready," he said. The Japanese never caught the fisherman who killed Major Tanaka. The investigation concluded with strong suspicions but no proof, no bodies, no justice. In the months that followed, security at coastal garrisons was increased dramatically. Civilian workers were screened more carefully. But the damage was done. Not just the loss of Tanaka's intelligence expertise, but the psychological impact. If a major could be killed in his own quarters within a fortified compound by someone who walked in as casually as a fisherman delivering the morning catch, then no one was truly safe. Felipe Mercado continued working with the guerrillas until the end of the war. He participated in 17 more operations, though none as dramatic as the assassination in Nasugu. After liberation, he returned to fishing, to a quiet life on the water. He never spoke publicly about what he'd done, but among the guerrilla fighters, among those who remembered the war's small victories and the desperate chances taken, the story was told and retold. The Filipino who slipped into a Japanese camp as a fisherman and made sure the officer never walked out. Sometimes the smallest disguises hide the deadliest intentions. Sometimes invisibility is the most powerful weapon. And sometimes all it takes is one man, one moment of perfect timing, and the courage to walk through an enemy's door as if you belonged there.